You guys want front? You, so Jesse.
David, why don't you sit over here? Hey! No, go.
Hi, how are you? Be careful, thank you.
Hey, how are you? I'm Jesse.
As in, should we make sure that the Zoom people can hear? Thank you.
Last one.
Thank you. So a quick, everyone here's okay?
Yeah.
Small group. If someone on Zoom doesn't hear, let us know somehow, chat. Our quick agenda, some introductory remarks, then we'll hear from David, Elisa, and Jesse. I think Ilana and Eitan have something to say. Noah has something to say. Then we will make the special El Malay Rachamim prayer, and then we'll say the mourner's Kaddish, then we'll bury, and then Kiddush to follow. Okay? So, just a few sort of introductory remarks. So, Grandma Frieda was always very proud of being a descendant of Rav Shmuel Moliver. And she talked about it a lot, especially sort of later on, and took quite great pride in it. And you'd think that sort of at first blush, not too much in common between Grandma Frieda and a 19th century Haredi rabbi, the son of the Vilna Gaon student. Not too much in common with them. So, the Rav Shmuel Moliver was born in 1824 in a city called Gleboki near Vilna in the Ukraine. An exceptional student, what they called Ilui. At 3, he was already commenting on the Torah. He began his study and mastery of the Talmud at age 8. He studied in Volozhin, which was one of the most famous institutions in Eastern Europe at the time, where he commented on pretty much many aspects of Jewish thought. So not so much in common so far. But there are a few things that really, when you hear what he did, you sort of see or hear what Grandma did, at least in some of her actions and some of her statements over time. So, first of all, he believed strongly that we don't make our livelihood from Judaism, right? In other words, you should have a full-time job. They're excluded from this, by the way, sort of a full-time job, and he resisted the taking a professional job until there were several deaths in his family and they were sort of destitute, and only then do you accept the position of being a rabbi in Bialystok. He was one of the founders of what was called the Chovei Tzion. So these were, Chovei Tzion means the lovers of Zion, people that in an early stage really believed in the importance of moving and creating a successful agricultural and political entity in the state of Israel. And he did all kinds of things to sort of further this entity. In 1882, he met with Baron de Rothschild to help fund a settlement. At that time, it was called Ekron, which means sort of essential. Today, it's called Maskeret Batya, and I can tell you that Aunt Elisa and I visited there, and she was treated like royalty as a descendant of the Moliver Rebbe. At a certain point, he also founded what's called Mizrahi, the Merkaz Ruchani of the religious Zionist movement, but he was also one who aggressively tried to introduce secular study into Jewish schools at every level. He stood up and publicly supported Herzl at the Second Zionist Congress in Vienna in 1897 at great personal risk, and he believed that Zionism should include all walks of Judaism, regardless of your religiosity, is that we all together as Jews should stand up. And he actually debated some pretty important people in this same thing. One of the names that, for those who are familiar, was they called him the Rav, which was Hildesheimer. So, and he took great personal risk to do these kinds of things. He actually made the comment that it is better to be a secular Jew in Israel than a religious Jew outside of Israel, and came under great fire for saying those kinds of things. These things sound a lot more like Grandma Frieda. I think she was sort of proud of the Molliver in her, of the Segal in her, and of the Raben in her. So maybe just a really quick word of Molliver Torah, Molliver teaching. He wrote a ton, but the vast majority of it is lost. One of the things that he spoke about was something called the Valley of the Dry Bones. So we, as Americans, probably see this most often because Abraham Lincoln quoted this passage from Ezekiel 4 times. His idea had to do with with sort of the rebuilding and preserving the Union. But basically, it's a vision of Ezekiel. It's the 37th chapter, where Ezekiel sees a great valley of dry bones, right? There is no moisture. These are bones that are decaying and falling apart. It is the ultimate of devastation and of loss. Maybe a moment like we're sort of experiencing now. And one of the most famous lines that he actually comments on is, the bones sort of speak, right? And they say, Avda tikvatenu. Those words may resound because nigzarnu lanu. We have had sort of a horrible gzeira, horrible decree upon us. So those words, Avda tikvatenu, we sing all the time, right? They are central to the words of Hatikva, right, which was hope. So in that moment of seeing this horrible devastation, he saw in this vision the rebuilding of the future and the importance of rebuilding it in Israel itself. So she was an ardent Zionist, and she actually walked the walk and moved there and lived there and supported people and supported herself for their first 10 years. So for us here today, I know I certainly speak for Elisa, who visited Grandma most every day and over the past weeks, even twice a day, and saying that just like the rejuvenation and the reincarnation of the dry bones in Ezekiel, I hope that we as a family will take this opportunity to sort of intensify, have it be a coming together, greater mutual appreciation, greater understanding, greater support, and in so doing, further that genetic legacy of what the Molliver Rebbe and what Grandma Frieda sort of wanted us. We say Yehei Zichram Bruchim, their memory should be a blessing. Nishmatam Tehei Tzurim B'Tzorah Chaim, their souls will be bound up amongst us as we sort of remember them. Thank you. I think David is next.
Steve, thank you. That was quite elucidating, and it actually made me reflect on a story that I'll add in here too. So, what measures a life well lived? Some say it's when you give more than you get. Others say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Somewhat of a tenet of the Torah, said in a much more simplistic fashion. Some say it might be the values and virtues you hold dear and strive for to make our world a better place. And some say it's a life filled with joy and love that others around you share in. And finally, maybe a life well lived may simply be about the moments, not the milestones. So, adding on to some of the words Steve described around Frieda Raben, a mother to me, a mother-in-law to my wife, a grandmother to our children, a wife to my dad. What were her moments? Well, she grew up quite poor in Williamsburg, New York, and I remember the visits accompanying her and my dad and my siblings to see my grandmother in their tiny little apartment with the offerings of everyone's favorite food, stuffed cabbage. And of course, there was always, on cold days, warm coffee full of milk and lots of sugar. That's when my addiction started at age 5. Mom didn't have the easiest of lives when she was young, with her mother working many, many long hours in a sewing factory. And in fact, she didn't see much of her. And also her father working in a factory, but also as a chazan and studying Torah. She shared a small room with her sister Lori, and she intimated to me on several occasions that she would often study at night lying in the bathtub with a small light on. However, I think this brought around quite a bit of grit and determination to succeed. Perhaps a chip on the shoulder to drive her, as I always got the sense she didn't receive the strongest support from her father. She graduated high school at 16 years of age and went on to City College in Brooklyn and later into a successful career in social work and psychology and marriage counseling. So I reflect on moments where she made me feel safe, where she challenged me, where she encouraged me down the road to learn, to read. I look to moments where she shared in my joys, whether it be flying over to Israel with me and sitting in the stands watching me play in the Maccabi games, sharing lunches together in the Old City in Jerusalem. I recall in 2008 when we were living in England, and I was invited to give a talk at the Israeli Head and Neck Cancer Society. And where was it being held? Lo and behold, it was in Safat. So we flew there, and Mom and Dad flew there and met us. And we went to the cemetery, and we just had a picture of the grave site where Dove was buried, and who I was named after, and she just had this old picture. And of course, Carrie, who went to the top of the will list because she triangulated this using her inner mathematical computations to actually locate the one grave site, and we took pictures of it, and so it was quite meaningful to Mom, no question about that. She was there when I graduated from college and medical school. She held me and called me Mamala when I wasn't feeling well as a young boy, supporting me and telling me to go for it when I was considering a big pivot away from academic medicine. She built a thriving marriage and adolescent counseling practice in Greensboro. And unfortunately, it was also an excellent conduit to finding out about the shenanigans my brother and I pulled, inclusive, yet not limited to, the house parties we threw when they were away on a trip. And several weeks later, when a client of hers remarking to her, "What wonderful parties your sons put on. My son had the best time there." She seemed to derive immense joy when she and my dad were able to return to live in Israel after Dad stepped down his chair at Wake Forest. And they bought a place in Jerusalem and then also a seaside place in Caesarea, and she was very proud of it. She often remarked multiple times per day when we were in her apartment in French Hill, looking out over the desert, about the winds coming off the desert. The Hamsin, she called it, and she would really accentuate the Hamsin. So we would jokingly keep asking her on our visits, "What was that wind called again? You know, the one from the desert." "Oh," she would remark, "the Hamsin." So I always remember our travels through Europe in the summer of 1974 and her buying us Toblerone chocolates as treats to keep us going. This was following our year in Israel in 1973, and realizing during that time after Yom Kippur services that Israel was at war, when my siblings and I realized that we were the only ones playing hide and go seek in the streets after service. And so we knew something wasn't right, especially when we heard the sirens, and we ran home into our apartment, and we huddled in our apartment in Jerusalem. And Mom and Dad made the decision to stay in Israel during the war. I felt like my mom was very proud of that decision. I think it builds on some of Steve's remarks about her commitment to Zionism, and it really connected us with Israel. She would go down to the grocery store very early in the morning, nearly daily, to get in early to get the milk and bread for us and my siblings. She always fed me first, being her favorite child. I will admit, there could be challenging moments in our relationship. She could be very stubborn, emotionally reactive at times. Some moments, though, when reflecting back over the last couple of days, drove me most likely putting a slight chip on my shoulder to perhaps overachieve, to strive to be the best. Although perhaps leading me to place more emphasis on milestones over moments. She taught my kids to stand up for themselves, to speak their mind, at times without crucial filters accepted in our society. She made them laugh, and she challenged them, and she was there for their important moments in their Jewish education. The other day I was reading, and I was actually watching Ken Burns' documentary on Ben Franklin as he listed his virtues that he strove for every day, 13 of them, and he went around the community telling everybody that he was trying to follow these virtues. So I thought, what does he have in common with my mom? Well, frugality came to mind. Waste not, want not. And often heard the refrain when we were at dinner as youngsters, don't waste food. Kids in Africa are starving. Of course, we might offer a simple solution, such as send them our food. But another time, perhaps, he had in common with mom was lack of humility, defined in part as imitating Jesus and Socrates. Never heard Ben Franklin mention Moses or Solomon, to my knowledge, so this probably wouldn't have worked out anyway with my mom. But justice stood out. This, within the walls of Judaism, was important to her, and she was proud that Judaism was centered in part around justice. Another virtue of Mr. Franklin, silence. Not my mom's strongest virtue. At the end of the day, Frieda's life, although slowing down quite a bit over the last 5 years, was one of the desire to learn new things, always taking classes wherever she was, offering me up some inappropriate jokes for a chuckle. She was a unique individual. I think we can all agree on that. And always looking for a good debate on any issue, certainly around Jewish causes. And I'll finish with a paraphrase quote from Thomas Campbell. To live in hearts that we leave behind is never to die. So she will live in my heart as a person, although complicated at times, challenging me to try and be my best, and she'll live in the hearts of our children. Mom, I hope your next journey is one that opens your heart and fills you with love and joy among the stars.
First I'd like to give a shout out to Nigel, my security caretaker who helped to keep my mother alive during my visits over the last 2 weeks. He couldn't be here today. We send his wishes. This is a poem called Ode to a Difficult Mother. It's actually called When I Come to the End. When I come to the end of my journey and I travel my last weary mile, just forget, if you can, that I ever frowned, and remember only the smile. Forget unkind words I have spoken. Remember some good I have done. Forget that I ever had heartache, and remember I've had loads of fun. Forget that I've stumbled and blundered and sometimes fell by the way. Remember, I have fought some hard battles and won ere the close of the day. Then forget to grieve for my going. I would not have you sad for a day, but in summer just gather flowers and remember the place where I lay. And come in the shade of the evening when the sun paints the sky in the west. Stand for the few moments beside me and remember only my best.
Nigel was a good man. Frieda Sarah Siegel Raben, read as she was known. Better? Nigel was a good man. Frieda Sarah Siegel Raben, read as she was known. My mother. She was complicated, as you all know, and complicated is one of the best words I could find to describe her. She was also proud, loving, fearful, and stubborn, but complicated is really where it is. She grew up poor in Williamsburg in a small walk-up apartment, the middle child of an Orthodox family. She considered herself lost in the mix between an older sister, who claimed didn't like her, and a younger brother who she claimed was treasured by her father. She worked hard in school with the aim of leaving it all behind. And when the day came, she rarely looked back. She traveled after college to Israel and Europe, fulfilling a dream. Being worldly and educated was important to her. She came back to New York, and on a fateful night, at the urging of her mother, she went to a party where she met my dad, a doctor. It was November 1961. In January 1962, a mere 7 weeks later, They were married. The dream continues. A few years in the city, wife of a doctor, 3 kids, and before you know it, off to Durham, North Carolina, where my dad took a job as a radiation oncologist. Academia. North Carolina. The South. Soon her 4th child came, spoiler me, and the world seemed brighter. But off to Miami, before she knew it, where my dad entered the world of private practice, coupled with proximity to family. And after a couple years of high society, we headed back to North Carolina, where my dad went back to academia at Wake Forest in Winston-Salem, followed quickly by Greensboro, when we realized that the Grand Poobah of the KKK lived next door to us. Academia, the South, the dream continues. In 1973, my dad was offered a sabbatical in Israel, and we picked up and moved, having barely been in our house in Greensboro. My dad worked, we played and went to school, and my mom relished in her Jewish identity and Israeli roots, a taste of what was to come. This adventure was an enormous source of pride for her, being an American in Israel. When we returned to Greensboro, her pride was great as well, having come back from living abroad. My mom's energies turned to school and getting her PhD in marriage and family counseling. With her PhD, she was a doctor. When someone would call asking for Dr. Raben, she would say, "Speaking," and relish in hearing them squirm, and yet cringe with frustration when she felt overlooked because she was not a medical doctor. The dream gets complicated. Marrying a doctor and being a doctor, Mom so wanted to be part of the it crowd, despite her disdain of it. Mom loved to tell of her life adventures, her travels, degrees, clients, her education, despite her disdain for braggarts. She didn't trust mental health therapists, despite being one herself. Complicated. Mom saw herself as what she could have been: a lawyer, a medical doctor, a world traveler, fluent in Romance languages, hobnobbing with the elite. Rather than being content with the here and now, she sat in the what it could have been and wished for her children to be all the things she dreamed of being. A complicated dream. She was incredibly self-aware and yet did not understand the effect she had on others. She demonstrated introspection and excellence. She demanded introspection and excellence of others, but not of herself. She had a sense of what the world should be, and at times lacked the patience to be okay with what it is. We all left home to go to school, and upon realizing we were not returning to Greensboro, she and my dad moved to Israel to embrace and be embraced by her Jewish identity. I think for her, this was the place where she could express herself freely, whether it was being Jewish or her support for Israel. Soon, though, she was back in the States looking for a place in all places, a posh country club-style community in Scottsdale. The it crowd. But that came with disdain, too. Again, complicated. Before long, they moved to Washington, D.C. and enjoyed several wonderful years with me, Kim, and Noah, and Finn. My children were very lucky to have my parents in their lives on a regular basis, even if the time was short. With all the moving around, I could not figure out, was she running from something, to something? She never seemed content to settle in one place and enjoy the view. Complicated. And then off to Chicago, and the complications begin to fade, and the dreams of what could have been begin to disappear. We know how the story ends. She left a legacy, though. 4 kids, 12 grandchildren, a couple great-grandchildren. Right, Eitan? Sorry about that. She left behind a generation of humans that are proud, humorous, kind, generous, and thoughtful. It is a good legacy. And as many people have messaged me, she left a legacy of smart, successful children and grandchildren who gave her beautiful memories, grandchildren, and lived lives she could be proud of with humility and grace. A complicated woman who led a complicated life for sure, but the beat goes on for us, and how we handle life will define our legacy. Frieda Sarah Siegel Raben, a poor girl who climbed and climbed, always wanting to be on top, but not sure if the top was the place where she belonged. My heart goes out. My heart goes out for her, but my love will always be there. Before I conclude, though, I want to thank my sister. Your patience, your humor, your humility, your grace. You had a job thrust upon you, and for the past few years you handled it better than anybody could have. I will miss your candidly funny texts after your visits with Mom, your funny stories about how you handled a moment with the nurses or a doctor, your potential rap sheet. Did see the police over there earlier. And your unabashed honesty in your feelings. You have allowed me time to laugh and space to grieve, and I thank you. And because a simple thank you is not enough, me, Adam, and David pitched in and got a brand new to you Chrysler Cordoba, complete with Corinthian leather, which is just sitting over there and waiting to be driven. Thank you.
Right in the middle. Perfect. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
So we are the first two grandchildren. Arguably, we're the favorites until Noah and Finn came along. And we're not too upset about it.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
A little bit. We won't speak very long, but one thing I think that I take from Grandma, she was always pushing us to be better. You finish undergrad, when's the master's? When's medical school? When's whatever, thank you. It was never enough, but she always wanted us to be better and pushed us, and it was nice. I mean, I'm not going to med school. Sorry, Grandma. Ain't happening, but it was nice.
Well, very well said. I think complicated is a phenomenal word for Grandma. And I think Jessie said it very well. She was very strong in her opinions, and she had a very strong image of the world and how she wanted it to be, how she wanted us as a family to carry out in this world. And criticism or not, I think criticism and self-awareness or not, I think every time she may have come off as complicated or come off as, with her own opinion, her own strong opinions, I think she really was pushing us to be just the best possible people we can be. And I'll never forget that, she was very much about shooting for the star, or shooting for the moon, landing amongst the stars, and it's a difficult world, and she only saw it as, she was only prideful in who we are as Jews, who we are as Zionists, who we are as people, and who we are as Rabens and as Lukovics and all that. And it's something I'll never forget. So thank you, Grandma. Yeah.
When I was younger, my favorite part of the day was always the end of school. And it wasn't because I was free and I could go home, but it was because I got to see my grandma. Almost every day, she would pick me up from school and we would go back to her apartment. She would sit me down on her couch. She would put a show on and give me an ice cream every single time. And she would just watch the show with me, and I would hate when my parents came to pick me up because I loved my grandma. I just loved hanging out with her, and she was the sweetest person to me ever. And she would let me look at her jewelry. I think she even gave me she gave me so much that I can't even ask, I couldn't ask for more because she was just so amazing. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all. Moving along, let's, the booklets on the inside right page have the English version of the traditional, memory blessing or memory. So I'll read it in Hebrew and then we'll read it in English together. Maybe we'll stand and say this together. Then we can, Kaddish is on the back page. Then we'll all participate in the actual burial. So, the tradition is you don't actually hand the next person the shovel, you put it back in, let the next person do it. And sometimes the first couple shovels you actually do with the shovel inverted. It's a sort of a sign of the fact that this isn't something that you do sort of easily, willingly, those kinds of things. So if anyone wants to read with me in Hebrew, it's if you go to the Raben text group, it's in there. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein B'Maramim, Hamtzeim Nucha Nuchano Tachat Kanvei HaShechina, B'Ma'alot K'toshim U'Torim Kezor Harakia Masirim Et Nishmat Sarah Frieda Bat Yosef U'Malka Shalcha La'olama B'Gan Eden Teheni Menuchata Ana Ba'al Harachamim Hasdireha B'Seiter Knafel Le'olamim U'Tzror B'Tzror HaChaim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'Tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava V'Nomar Amen. Together, El Malei Rachamim. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence, among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament, upon the soul of Frieda Sarah Raben, PhD, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring her under the cover of thy wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession, and may her repose be peace. Amen. Okay. So now we'll all participate in burial, and Kaddish first, just the mourners themselves. Funkel Barry is on Zoom. I hope he is. We will say Amen to your Kaddish as well. Amen. Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabam Varach Leolam Umel Mayach.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yit'oman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalel Shmei Kedusha
Brichu.
Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbichata v'nechamata ta'amiran v'yalma v'yimru.
Amen.
Hey Shalom Rab Amin Shemayah v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom b'nomav hu yaseh Shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru.
Amen. Please be seated. I've often asked a question, and I think now I understand the answer. I've asked a lot of people and have not gotten the answer. So this thing that we just said, Kaddish, has something that until this moment I thought was a complete disconnect. The second paragraph says, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar. All these words of saying that God should be exalted, right, in different ways. And then the second half of that paragraph says, Le'ela min kol birchata, God should be exalted above all blessings and praises and elevations. But then we say, above all the blessings, the songs, the praises, and nechemata, and consolations. We are asking God to exalt God above all of our ability to console. And I always ask myself, we say Amen to Mourner's Kaddish all the time. What does it mean that we're trying to console God in every way in consolation? It seems like a disconnect. But in a moment where it's a little bit, where the notion of mourning is a little bit more challenging, a little bit more complicated, I think here is a moment where we take this time together to actually exalt God in a way that's not easy, right? It's complicated. But this is Le'elah min kol birchata, nechemata, and consolation. So again, I hope this is an opportunity for us to sort of join together. So we'll... Okay. Oh, wow, thank you. Yeah, so this is Israel. This is dirt from Israel. Someone can put it.
Customer will bury it in Israel, so the cat will be buried there. So bring it to Israel.
Thank you. She would appreciate this very much.
In a moment, once
He wants to.
Some amount of hours.
Oh.
He's going to remove the equipment, they'll do the earth, and then they'll put the cover on. So you step back, you're going to put the cover on, and then we'll open it.
I already just realized that, so I'm just trying to like cover it up. Already swallowed.
Here, buddy.
We can all sort of help.
Again, for those who want to participate in the burial, they do so from either side of the mound.
This is one of a short list of mitzvot for which it's completely altruistic. We derive no benefit from doing this. It's one of the truly altruistic mitzvahs that we can do. Yeah. For those that are on the Zoom list, thank you so much for participating with us. We know who all of you are, so thank you. We just reviewed the list. Of course, our hearts are with Adam, in person, but you're here, and Ann as well. We miss you guys. This is more than Maddie, let's be clear.
Yeah, it'll be your second quarter.
Yeah, you don't? Just the first one.
I'm not
If you place earth into the grave, let's gather back in the tent.
Thank you for everything.
Yeah, don't worry. That's so bad. Oh, let's take another shot.
Thank you for coming.
Couple up and then you gotta make a little headway.
All right, whoever wants to join in, let's line up and let go.
Yeah, you can break them like that. So the last part of this is usually that sort of formulaic consoling of mourners. So typically we would make lines. So maybe everybody except the siblings will sort of line up over there. And if you want the line that we're going to say, it's on the back page. So maybe all of us except for David, Jesse, Lisa, sort of line up back towards the hearse. And we'll say that line together, and you can repeat it as they're sort of walking through.
Right here, leading away from the grave. So if we can have everybody except for the immediate mourners come this way, this way. We're right here, the two rows. Come back up. Face up. In between. Yeah, right up this way. Perfect. Do whatever you want. So go entry one. We're gonna have the three mourners come this way.
Your folks, if you go yourself. Great.
We'll walk through. So המקום לכם, לכם בתום שעה, אדוני ציון בשמיים, ושמרו לכם אתם, בתום שעה, אדוני ציון בשמיים. This concludes the service and may return to your cars.
Thank you.